In this video, we're talking about the difference in cost of living between Georgetown, Texas and Austin, Texas. You guys are moving out here from California, New York, Minnesota, even Vietnam, and you have no idea what's what. So we're going to talk about all of that today. I'm Tiffany Moore. I'm a local realtor right here in Austin, Texas. So if this is your first time on the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ding that little bell. I put out videos every week about what it's like to live, eat, breathe, work, play, and love your life in Austin, Texas. So overall, the cost of living in Texas is lower than the national average. If the national average is 100, Texas is 94. Austin and Georgetown are going to come in a little bit higher than the average, and that's mostly due to housing and transportation costs. So the average cost of living in Georgetown, it's on an index of 108, and in Austin, it's 119, where the national average is 100. So the cost of living in Austin and Georgetown is higher than that in the rest of the country because of housing and transportation, but everything else is either at or below the national average. So things like healthcare, groceries, utilities, all those things are going to be at the average or below. So let's look at those expenses comparing Austin and Georgetown. I'm not gonna be able to remember all these numbers, so I'm gonna put a cool little screenshot up so you guys can follow along with me, but we're gonna start looking at the differences in all those expenses. So overall, Georgetown's cost of living is at 108, so just about 10% higher than the national average, and Austin's is 119. So let's go down and look at where those expenses are. So groceries are lower than the average for both Austin and Georgetown. Georgetown's at 95 and Austin's at 96, so pretty similar. Healthcare, this is everything from like your health insurance, your doctor's visits, your Band-Aids, your toothpaste, stuff like that. The health costs are gonna be lower in Georgetown than in Austin. About 92 on the index versus 94. So again, pretty comparable, not too much of a drastic difference, but there is a little bit of a bump when you go from Georgetown to Austin. Housing we're gonna get to in a second, but let's just look at these numbers real quick. So the housing in Georgetown is 25% higher on the index than the national average, and in Austin it's 60% higher. So we're gonna look at some specific numbers in a second, but these are the main forces that are driving the cost of living to be higher than the national average in Georgetown and in Austin. So home costs, average home costs in Georgetown, this is for summer of 2020, is $319,000, and in Austin it's $596,000. So a huge difference between the average home sales from Georgetown to Austin. Utilities, I mentioned, are about the same. They're actually a little bit higher in Georgetown, so we're at 101 versus Austin at 99. And transportation, again, this is the other factor that's higher than the national average that's driving the cost of living up. Not nearly as much as housing, but it is something that's above the national average. So in Georgetown, transportation costs is about 113, and in Austin, it's 109. So that's one factor that's a little bit lower in Austin than in Georgetown, but still higher than what you're gonna find the national average. And then some miscellaneous costs in Georgetown, 95.5, and in Austin, 100, so just about the national average. And this is just things like anything that doesn't fall into the categories that we talked about, that are groceries, health insurance, etc. So like restaurants, shoes, whatever else you spend your money on. So the cost of living in Texas on that index scale is 94. That's Texas as a whole. And then we talked about cost of living for Georgetown's 108 and for Austin it's 119. And the major reasons for those costs being so high is because of housing. So we're gonna dig into the housing numbers comparing Austin to Georgetown. All right, I got a whole bunch of numbers to go through. So I'm gonna put a little graphic up on the screen so you can kind of follow along with me and we can compare Georgetown to Austin. So let's look at average home price. So this is for this summer, the summer of 2020. The average home price in Georgetown was $319,000, and in Austin was $596,000. So pretty close to double the home price from Georgetown to Austin. This is a huge deal. It's why the cost of living in Austin is so much higher than that in Georgetown and in Texas. So the next number that we're gonna look at is the increase over last year. So average home price for Georgetown's $319. That's a 6% increase over the home prices from last year. So awesome, you buy a house in Georgetown, your investment is increasing. The increase in Austin from average home price from last year to this year is 17%. So the home prices in Austin are higher and they are growing at a faster rate. They're going up 17% from year to year versus 6% for Georgetown. So if you're thinking about where to buy an investment property, Austin is going to appreciate faster, but Georgetown is going to be a little bit easier to get into on the ground level if you don't have $600,000 to spend for your first investment home in Austin. So let's look at price per square foot. We're talking about houses, comparing houses in Georgetown to Austin. We want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. So sometimes houses in Austin can be much bigger or much smaller than homes in Georgetown and vice versa. There's just different styles and different neighborhoods and pockets. So we're going to talk about per square foot, regardless of how big the house is, how much are we paying per square foot in Georgetown versus in Austin? So in Georgetown, we're paying $153 per square foot, and in Austin, we're paying $280. So again, this is, regardless of the size of the house, this is per square foot, comparing apples to apples, what the cost is. And then let's talk about the closing price versus the original list price. So when a home goes on the market, it used to be 15 years ago that, you would list it and the buyer would come in and you'd have some kind of negotiation, go back and forth, and maybe you sell that home for $10,000 less than what you listed it at because you're expecting to do some negotiation. The way that the market is in Austin and in Georgetown and everywhere in the Austin area right now is that it's just not happening. There's so much competition and there's so few houses that are for sale that they're getting snatched up for a lot of times above asking price, if anything right at or just barely below. So for Georgetown, homes are selling for 98% of the original asking price. So if you put your home up for, $300,000, it's going to sell for about $294,000. There basically are no deals to get. There's no haggling. You're not going to save a ton of money. It's just not the way that the economy is working right now in the Austin area. We're talking about supply and demand. So there's very little supply and there's a lot of demand. So you really don't have a lot of negotiating power when you're going to buy a home in Georgetown or in Austin. So in Austin, the percentage of what did it sell for versus what was it listed for? So it sold for 99.6% of the original listing price. So pretty much 100% of listing price. You've got to go in there and offer either the asking price or higher if you want to buy a house in Austin. So along with your mortgage and your principal and your interest and all that good stuff, another factor to consider when you're looking at buying a home or real estate in Austin are taxes and the tax rates. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you probably know that Texas has no income taxes, but instead we have significant property taxes. So how do the property taxes compare in Austin versus Georgetown? The property tax rate is pretty comparable. In Georgetown, you could be paying anywhere from 1.85% to 3%, and in Austin, anywhere from 1.65% to 3%. That's for homes that are on the market today, right now. And it all depends on what neighborhood you're in. So some neighborhoods are lower, some are higher, but definitely they're going to be pretty uniform within a certain area that you're looking in. And another big factor, so we talked about housing and transportation being the two factors that are putting the cost of living in Austin and Georgetown higher than Texas, higher than the national average. So let's look at gas real quick. Gas in Texas is pretty reasonable. It's not nearly as bad as California, where you're paying like $2.75, $3 a gallon. In Austin right now, like right around the corner from my house, gas is $1.69 a gallon. The average right now, if you're going in downtown Austin, it's going to be about $1.89 or $2 a gallon. And in Georgetown, gas is about $1.79 or $1.70 a gallon. So pretty comparable, only like a 10-cent difference in price per gallon. So over time, that's going to add up, but for every fill, it's not really going to be too big of a deal. So overall, it is much cheaper to live in Georgetown than it is in Austin for the major factors of housing and transportation. Everything else is pretty much the same price, but the housing in Austin is just insane. But if you're able to buy, then your appreciation is going to explode along with the market. So something to keep in mind. The cool thing about Georgetown is it's kind of like two different cities. So around the university and around downtown Georgetown, you have a lot of really old, historic, cool homes. And then just like 15, 20 minutes outside, you have this explosion of new construction. So we talked about the supply and demand factor. there's more supply coming. Unfortunately, it's not coming fast enough, so the builders still aren't able to keep up with the demand from buyers, but there is more on the way. So there's more construction on the way. But just a factor to keep in mind is, even though there is more construction, there's still, you know, more buyers than there are houses. So for a national builder, I had 2 clients who were looking at new houses in totally different areas of the city. One was looking up in Georgetown in the brand new neighborhoods, and one was looking over in Austin in a neighborhood that they were building kind of tucked off along the east side. So we were looking at the exact same floor plan, the exact same builder. In Georgetown, one of my clients bought this house for $292, and in Austin, that home was going for about $400, and they were going to receive multiple offers on it for a brand new construction home, which is like unheard of. So something to keep in mind when you're talking about moving to Georgetown versus Austin. It's going to be a little bit less of a hassle to go to Georgetown, and you're going to stretch your dollar farther, but it is a different city. So if you've got to commute down to downtown Austin or even into like Allendale or Crestview, that commute is definitely going to be something that you want to factor in. But overall, total cost of living, Georgetown is going to be cheaper than Austin, hands down. I'm going to have a bunch of other videos popping up here. Start clicking on those so you can learn everything there is to know about living in Austin, working here, what there is to do. And if you haven't seen my video on Georgetown yet, be sure to click that here, and I will see you soon.